Welcome to Fantasy Book Review Report for Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Well, there's going to be a bit of a warning. I do still have a bit of a cold, so there might be a small pause if I just going to mute myself to cough. Alright, well, let's continue on and let's go straight to the actual book. The book itself is a very funny narrative that it's based on the biblical apocalypse, but not exactly the biblical apocalypse as it is in the book of Revelations in the Bible. It's more based on the popular perception of the biblical apocalypse and how do we see it as happening overall. From that perspective, it is very funny because what it does, it takes that similar account, a familiar account, and kind of turns all the tropes on its head. Because as you're reading along, or anybody would be reading along, they'll be looking and saying, okay, well, here's the situation. This is something that's happening when you expected something to happen, but it's not happening the same way. And in a way, the book actually gives the reason why our expectations actually should not be reasonable. So, certain familiarity with the biblical account of apocalypse, and I would say more of a familiarity with the pop cultural view of a biblical account of apocalypse is needed to enjoy this book. If you don't have that, you will not get the same experience out of it. Also, the book requires some familiarity with the British life and society because there's certain jokes and certain playoffs that are happening because of that, because it's taking place in England. So certain knowledge of that will be required. Actually, maybe even minor knowledge of history, but I think the book does enough to explain itself. So it will add to enjoyment, but I don't think it's 100% necessary. Now, as I already mentioned about the idea that it literally turns all the tropes that we have seen already of portrayals of the biblical apocalypse in film, on TV, or in books, and kind of works with that and to create pretty much a very funny situations and very situations that I'll say that you have to think about a lot. And to say like, why do we expect something to happen this way? Why it's not happening the other way around? There's also a lot of sarcastic commentary on the world and humanity overall, and the book goes on into everything. It's pretty much well, if you read Terry Pratchett before, and I did the Discworld series, let's say, then you know that he literally gives a lot of commentary, generally on the world and humanity. I'm less familiar with Neil Gaiman, but again, I believe that he also does the same thing. So let's talk about the story. Well, the story is pretty simple. I'm gonna give you it here. We have a demon and an angel. Both of them have been living on Earth for a while. I think like from the very beginning of creation, they've been living on Earth. Where one is trying to corrupt souls, the other one's trying to save them, and they've been living so long on Earth that they really like their life on Earth and experiences they get here. And when they learn that apocalypse is going to happen, well, they decide to join forces to stop it because they don't want Earth to go away. They want to continue to live on Earth. They don't want to go back to heaven or hell, and so on. So, that's pretty much the story, and other characters get involved in this whole story, and of course, all the humor arises from that situation. The major themes that you're going to get in this book are the following: good versus evil. But I would say it's not this usual good versus evil type of theme. In this case, it's a interpretation of this concept that you're looking at. So it's what is good, what is evil are the major themes here. Is the discussion of that. There's also discussion of free will versus illusion of free will. What exactly is free will? Can we actually understand what it is? And do we, if we believe that free will is an illusion, how can we tell that? It's kind of a being this is explored in this book. Nature versus nurture is also very much important here. That discussion is held here because there are children in the book, and so because of that, we get a certain discussion of this kind of understanding. What's more important, nature versus nurture, and how one kind of affects the other. Now, for the other major theme is, of course, the humanity's propensity for good and evil. Throughout the book, is the idea is that how how good the humans are, how evil the humans are, but it's possible for the two actually to be combined. And generally, the idea is explored is kind of from the topic of is it everything good over everything evil is being done because some kind of external forces are affecting the humans, or whether the humans themselves are good or evil? And that all, of course, as all these themes are bringing together the idea of complexity of situations. So I mean, the idea is that you cannot really draw clear cut on anything or find simple solutions to anything. And I think that's actually the other theme there that I will discuss later on, is the idea that nothing is really simple or easy to understand. There's minor themes such as friendship, loyalty, they need to belong to some place, that kind of there. These themes are pretty minor. Well, and they exist there because, well, you have characters who are friends, you have friends who are loyal to each other, and so on, right? Well, for that reason, I don't really dwell on minor themes. So, I would say, in the conclusion, this is a great book with a very funny narrative that has, well, obvious on the nose humor in some cases it doesn't, but more of it is on the nose, but it's still very funny, very interesting to read, and the whole premise is really cool for the book. After I finished reading it, I wanted to read more and to find out more about the characters, so it kind of, in a way, the book never doesn't outstay its welcome, which is very important as far as I see. A good book has to be the one that leaves you wanting more, rather than being already bored by it by the time you finish reading it. Now, this is not complete review of it. I will go on in the next section, which I will talk about the comparison to the TV show. So, with regards to TV show, and the reason actually I read the book is because I found out the TV show was being made. Well, TV show is kind of hard to say. It was made on Amazon Prime, so it's kind of something being streamed. But either way, let's to compare it to the TV show. I think the book is better than the TV show in this case. I did enjoy the TV show as well, but there were some changes. Some changes were required due to the medium that was being used, because this is a TV show was being made versus a book, so certain things have to be changed, and I was pretty much fine with that. Things I didn't really like was the change to the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse. The introduction and development of these characters was not as big, and that might be the reason because the TV show was a bit constrained. It has a certain amount of episodes it has to get stuff into. The book has way more pages, of course, and it has more ability to describe and give more detailed, I guess, accounts of these characters. But to me, the Horsemen were interesting characters, so I kind of didn't like the fact that they were so easily and quickly kind of brushed, well, not brushed off, I would say, but I guess easily introduced and then easily moved along. The characters of the children in the book are more developed, and it kind of makes sense for the finale to have all the, what happened there, based on what the characteristics of the children have been provided earlier in the book. In the TV show, that's not the case. We don't have that situation here. The TV show a bit more abrupt in terms of why children would be acting a certain way. Okay, again, I think it's constraint of the plot. It has to be fitted into the certain number of episodes, but that's the reason they could not put that much effort in it. Although I think the children in this case should have been more effort should have been put in there. I think they're more of a main characters than the Horsemen are. And finally, the TV show added a whole sections of subplots for the Angel and for Demon, and those subplots were not in the book, and they actually, I think, made the show drag out longer. I would say they should have just dumped those subplots and just use that time for the children and the Horseman characters. It would have been more and better use of time as far as I see it. I don't really see those Angel Demon subplots that were put into the TV show really that beneficial. Well, let's go ahead. Now we're going to go into spoilers because I will be discussing the actual plot details of the book and my thoughts on them and specifics. So if you don't want any spoilers, that's the time to stop watching. If you find the spoilers and want me to go ahead, then you just keep on watching. I will continue on in a bit. I'm just going to give people enough time to leave the actual video if they don't want to hear spoilers. So you all have been warned. So now I'm forging ahead. So let's go into detailed discussion of the characters. The Four Horsemen of Apocalypse, like I was talking earlier about it. in the TV show they were not as well introduced or really developed. Here they are way more developed, and there are usually 4 horsemen of apocalypse: war, death, pestilence, and hunger. That's actually not exactly according to the Book of Revelations, I believe. I think actually now I'm trying to draw back. I think it's pestilence that's actually is not a very clear cut as a horseman. Other ones are way more easily explained, but none of them I think actually really are named with those names. So the names are given based on the interpretation of what the actual description of the horseman in the Book of Revelations is. But let's get back to the ones that actually are in the Good Omens book. So we have War, and War is a female horseman, and all horsemen are metaphors for something. And so in this case, the war is kind of a metaphor for something very seductive, but also very dangerous. So war, by her presence, starts wars in any area. But each time people see her, they are seduced by her. She's a very seductive person, but at the same time, they're very much scared of her. So it kind of really pretty much describes our human relationship with the war, right? We have we're certain way seduced by war. There's a lot of it in our books, in our on the television, in the film, in video games. It's pretty much a part of all the different narratives that we have. But at the same time, we're literally scared of it. We're terrified by war itself. The other horseman is death, but I would say death is pretty much self-explanatory. It's everywhere. That's how it's described in the book, and there's not much more you can say about death. It's himself. He does serve as a kind of a counter to the other character, one of the main characters in the book, named Adam, who is Antichrist, who kind of death is skeleton, old type of thing, you can say, while the Antichrist is a child, presenting something new, life, and so on. So it does kind of serve as antithesis to the kind of antithesis to each other in that way. So it's pretty interesting that way. But I say as a metaphor, so it doesn't do much there, and it's Death's introduction is very simple in the book because again, we all kind of familiar with it. The third horseman of apocalypse I'm going to talk about is pollution. Now, in Book of Revelations, it's actually usually, in the biblical account, we always talk about this pestilence. But in Good Omens, it said that pestilence retired because humans invented, penicillin in this case, and therefore pestilence is no longer a problem for humans. So now it's a pollution. And pollution is kind of shown to be something that slowly is causing what seems to be a minor damage, but which accumulates over time, creating a major damage overall to the human environment. So from that perspective, it's a very interesting metaphor to show, showing that how minor actions and minor things in the end escalate into major problems when it comes to environment. Now, the final horseman is hunger. Hunger is kind of is an unconquered reality of our existence as humans. We always get hungry, but in here, it's kind of shown to be that we in the book, I would say, it shows that hunger is more of a force that we are unable to conquer because what we've been creating is not helping with conquering hunger. So in the book, hunger is actually created for a few things. He's created for creating high-end restaurants where people pay a large amount of money for small little portions of food. The idea is that, as the book says, there never have been so many rich people in the world who were also hungry at the same time. Hunger is also responsible for creation of a highly processed foods. He has a whole chain of restaurants that serve processed foods that do not have any nutritional value in them. That's the idea that the hunger creates, and that's something that humans consume. And of course, all this is allusions to a modern day approach to food. while yes, we no longer are really starving as we most likely were before back in history, our food has become kind of interesting in terms of nutritional value being low in some cases because of the high processing and really being dangerous to us in that way. At the same time, we also created this all ideas of high cuisine, which in the end leave us hungry after we ate at those restaurants. The other two characters are, of course, the demon and the angel. One's supposed to represent evil, the other's supposed to represent good, and both should not have any free will. But do they have free will or not is something that's is being kind of questioned here in the book, because both of them say they can't have free will, but in the end they decide to interpret their tasks in such a way as it might create the idea that maybe they do have free will, or maybe that's an illusion of free will that we have here, because both of them are not kind of supposed to go along with this apocalypse plan, but they end up resisting it, and the idea they form about it is that maybe that's how it was meant to be all along. So these characters in the end lead to the whole interpretation of the theme of this idea of free will versus the illusion of free will. How much free will do we actually have, and how much we don't, and whether we can actually tell the difference or not. If we have free will or we don't have free will, and whether does it really matter in the end then. The major themes, of course, we're going to discuss the same ones that we already talked about, and I would say that talking about free will, I would say it's not on the slide, but I will talk about a bit of it. There's also the whole idea of prophecies. There are prophecies in the book, and that people are following, and the idea is that can somebody predict your future, and whether you should have a predicted future or not. That's actually is interesting idea here as well, because in the end, the two, I would say, kind of side characters, but still important characters, decide to burn down a book of prophecies that should be very accurate and should tell them what's going to happen in the future, because, well, they don't want to kind of follow the same kind of I guess they want to have a more free will idea, being freed from some kind of a book that prescribes what's going to happen. Now, when it comes to the other major themes, let's talk about here. The idea is that people are very complicated when it comes to their actions and motivations. And this is demonstrated through the idea of what motivates people in the book. It's talked about that the angel and demon trying to corrupt and save souls, right? So one of them is trying to push people towards worse things than possible, and the other one's trying to pull people towards good things. But throughout the book, it's demonstrated that humans are pretty much capable of being more imaginative when it comes to doing evil actions, or I guess good actions, than either demon or the angel can think of. And the idea is that people can have combined elements of good and evil together in them is also explored. Or sometimes it's very difficult to tell what is good or what's evil, right? So that's the other major theme, that good versus evil, and what has to be sacrificed for the greater good, and what is the greater good, and so on. All this is being discussed, and like I said, the book shows you that it's not very clear cut idea of good or clear cut idea of evil, because it's at one point, I would say in the book, the angel decides to kill the Antichrist, who's a child at that moment. So the angel literally is prepared to kill the child, because in his opinion that will stop the apocalypse, which is the greater good, which is what they want to have happen. But is that actually a good thing to do? The idea is that other actions of either the demon or the angel in the end as a good or evil is explored, because they lead to further different consequences that occur because they interact with people. And so, of course, the idea, what is the greater good, what are we trying to accomplish in the end, and how are we trying to accomplish to it, is also very much important. And also the corruption of people, and how corrupted they can easily get corrupted by different ideas or swayed by that, is explored in the book, and I would say some of the situations would be, again, when the angel demon try to see who they're influencing, they end up seeing that they actually quite often seems to be influencing the same people, or maybe those people are actually playing both of them against each other. There's a theme of difficulty of resolving different problems. So that theme is played out overall in the following fashion. It shows different problems that we have around the world, from environment to such as in rainforest shrinking and so on, right? And we have nuclear waste. We have whaling problems of people hunting down whales that are going whales possibility of going them extinct, and it's very difficult to solve these problems, and this is shown by having, well, Antichrist here, the character named Adam, who is an Antichrist, who has the ability to shape things around him through his imagination, but he's not very conscious of that ability, so he shapes them kind of subconsciously. Who once gets experience all this different new age type of magazines where he reads about different problems. Also, he begins to, I guess, imagine solutions, and they do come around. But when you look at those solutions, it's like, well, if rainforests are shrinking, we should just have more rainforests. We have to get more rainforests back. But it shows you that, let's say, that's not an easy solution to happen, because in certain areas, those places already have something else there now that where the rainforest used to be, so you can't just put rainforest back there, right? There's no easy way to substitute nuclear fuel with anything that will make sense. You can't really just attack whaling ships. There will be other problems because of caused by that. If you just in this case, a child creates a monster to attack whale ships, but that also causes other problems in the end. So solutions are not very easy. Yes, there are problems and so on, but the idea is that there's no simple solution, because everything involves a lot of thinking. You have to do a lot of balancing in order to do a proper solution. And of course, this goes back to the whole idea of complicated situations, of complications caused by humans, and so on. The final thing I think is that humanity needs to grow out of its childhood, and the reason I'm saying this is a theme because, well, humanity in the book is represented by the character of Adam, who is Antichrist at this point. But the idea is that he has a bit of evil incarnate in him. He has at the same time good. He has propensity to do both. And as a child, he lives in this cluster type of environment of his the home location where he's been living in this little village, and it's very much suited to his needs, and everything happens there what he likes and how it is. But the events of the book, of course, put him out of his comfort zone. He explores both the evil and the good side of him. And this, of course, mirrors the biblical story of Eden, right? Where we have Eden, where Adam and Eve are living. And this is usually considered to be the humanity's childhood, in terms of when you're thinking about as a religious narrative, where God, being a paternal figure, is taking care of the children, which are humans, and then once they are expelled, that's when their adult lives begin, right? Where they need to actually now leave. They kind of left the childhood behind, which was Eden. Here it is the same thing happening with Adam. In the end, he's kind of leaving his childhood behind, because at his age, he's already at the age when, well, parents usually send off the children to the boarding schools in Britain. This is his age, so he's moving on to the next section of his life, out of his usual comfort zone. And in the end, though, it's also shown that we still have certain propensity. He still maintains certain propensity for good and evil, because he's sitting in his garden where his father, not the real one, not the devil, but in this case, his human adopted, I guess, father or so on, who's punishing him for something, and he's sitting in the garden, and he decides that he's gonna run out of the garden and steal an apple from the apple tree, and then he gets chased by the owner of the apple tree. So, again, we kind of get the mirror of the Eden narrative. Apple getting kicked out of the childhood again. So the book is kind of trying to push, saying that here it is, we as a humanity need to kind of grow up, and it's shown the idea that we as humanity need to make a choice of what we want to go on, where we want to go on, how we want to resolve the different problems that we have, because solutions are not simple, but solutions are needed to avoid having an apocalypse kind of happen situation, right? There's also further type of situations where we have the two sub characters who are burning down the Book of Prophecies. They are also moving on. They're moving the next stage of their lives. The idea there is also, and the idea that they are moving away from a prescribed way of things, and they're going on to a more free type of, I guess, a decision-making situation where they're gonna go beyond what has been prescribed for them. So in that way, I think that's a kind of a major theme of the book, and the idea that's being talked about here. And what I really liked, the reason that I really liked the book, I think this is a great book because of that, because it explored all these themes. Well, thank you for listening and for watching.